Hey guys, Matt here. Welcome to Learn to Discern. So if I told you that I had a prophetic word from the Lord, and that prophetic word was tomorrow it's either going to rain or not rain, would you be very impressed with my prophetic word? Probably not, right? Well, unfortunately, these are the sorts of prophecies that are given all the time within the hypercharismatic movement, and we're going to look at an example of that taking place today with Troy Black. But before we get to our assessment of his prophetic word, if you guys want to help promote Christian content here on YouTube, please go ahead and take a second now to subscribe to my channel, and thank you in advance. Okay guys, just to clue you in, over the last 10 to 12 months, Troy Black has given numerous prophecies where he's talked about the 2024 presidential election, and he's talked about the person who wins the presidency is going to be the Mothman. He has referred to it numerous times, the Moth or the Mothman, and he's talked about it at length, but this Mothman is supposed to be the person who is going to win the election. Now, who is the Mothman? He's been somewhat vague about that. He is going to talk about it further in this video, but I wanted to give you some context so you can understand what he's talking about here. And if you've been following Troy Black, you know all of this, and that's good because this video is actually addressed specifically to you. I want to point out some very concerning things that are taking place with the way that Troy Black is giving this prophecy, and I think it should be alarming to you. Here we go.
Important. But this is what I saw when I was spending time with the Lord, August 28th. I saw Donald Trump, a vision of Donald Trump, with a human-sized moth directly behind him. And because it was directly behind him with its wings open, it was the same size as him, it looked like he had wings. That's what I saw. So it looked like he had these moth wings, but then the angle turned a little bit and I could tell he's standing here and there's a moth standing directly behind him with the wings. And so that's the picture I put onto the thumbnail of this video. I put a picture of Donald Trump with the moth wings behind him because that's what I was seeing. Obviously I covered his face to make it a little bit mysterious, but it's obviously Donald Trump, right?
All right, so up to this point, in previous videos, he's made it very clear that this person that's associated with the moth, that's the person who's going to win the presidency. So now he's seeing Donald Trump with a huge moth behind him. So you would think, well, it's pretty clear. Donald Trump must be the Mothman, the moth person, right? He's going to win the presidency. Well, you might think he's going to say that, but let's continue listening to this video.
On the thumbnail. And so then right after that, I saw that same moth. This is in a vision I was seeing from the Lord. That same moth was sitting on a microphone, kind of like this one, but it looked more like a microphone you'd see on stage at a rally or something. And I saw, or a debate, and I saw that moth sitting on top of the microphone, on the stage. And then I saw as it suddenly that one moth branched off into two. It's like it separated into two moths, and they both began to fly up, like toward me, away from the mic, but it was like up and away in two different directions. So they were separated. These two different moths were separating, and they both flew up in separate directions. And I heard the Lord say this. He said, the Mothman, he's referring back to that prophecy that I shared earlier this year about who's going to be president of the United States. That link is below. But he said, the Mothman will split into two moving forward. One will branch from the other and continue to grow while the other diminishes over time. And then he said, this is next, yet it's also ahead, further into the future. So this is something we're going to start seeing very soon, shortly, but it's also something that's going to be happening in a major way further into the future. And my guess would be that that's closer to the end of this next presidential cycle, the next 4 years, and kind of as that winds down. Here is why. So I'm just going to say this: if I had to guess, and I had to choose and say this is who I believe the moth is, whether it's and even back then, whether it was Trump or Biden, almost forgot the name of the guy that came before Harris. Speaking of forgetting things, but anyways, whether it was Trump or Biden back then, or whether it's Trump or Harris now, Kamala Harris, I personally believe it's Trump. Okay, based on what I've heard from the Lord.
All right, so he believes it's Trump, and he said he was in the middle saying, based off of what I believe I've heard from the Lord. So, I mean, if God said it, it should be pretty clear that it would be Trump, but he's really going to say that this is his own opinion, which is kind of interesting because he says that God is sharing that with him in a sense, but also, I mean, you see this big vision of Donald Trump with a moth behind him, you think that would be very clear. But he is going to make it evident that apparently it's not so clear. So let's see if I can get. Let's just listen to him say this again.
Forgot the name of the guy that came before Harris. Speaking of forgetting things, but anyways, whether it was Trump or Biden back then, or whether it's Trump or Harris now, Kamala Harris, I personally believe it's Trump. Okay, based on what I've heard from the Lord, based on what I've seen. Now, that's not a prophetic word. I'm not saying God told me Trump will be the next president, but I believe that the moth is Trump, and I'm going to show you why. Okay, this is the main reason I believe that. It's because when I heard that original Mothman prophecy, God said that moth's going to be president of the United States.
All right, we'll let him finish with his explanation here in a second. But did you already hear? He says it's really just my opinion. I think this is the interpretation that Trump is going to be the Mothman. So what does that mean? That means that basically his prophetic word is, I think this could be Trump, but also, it could be Harris. So then what are you actually saying? That either Trump or Harris will be the president. And this is what I'm trying to point out to you. Troy Black does this all the time with his prophecies. Here's what I saw, but I don't really have the interpretation. It could be this or it could be this. In this case, saying that it could be Trump or Harris is literally of no help. We all know that Trump or Harris is going to win the presidency. This does not help us at all. In fact, if you go back to his original Mothman prophecy, and again, if you've been following him, you'll know this, and if you're questioning it, you can send me an email, and I'll happily provide you a link and show you where it is. He says, Mothman, Mothman, and then he goes to another part, and he's like, it's going to be a mother-like figure, and he was like, so, it could, what do we have to do with this gender language of it's a man or it's a woman? He's like, it could be either. So, could be Trump, could be Harris, could be a man, could be a woman. Nobody knows. So, is this prophetic word really all that helpful? But let's listen to him now give his further explanation.
I prepared, the notes I heard, I put it down in my notes. I prayed. I said, Lord, when do you want me to share this? I got prepared. I even scheduled a live stream video to share it. And then guess what? The day before I shared the live stream, it was the day of, it was like right before, it was like within 24 hours before sharing the prophecy, I'm sitting in front of my computer and suddenly I had this thought just pop into my head that I need, and I believe it was from the Lord, but the thought was, I need to Google Trump moth. I need to Google that. And I Googled it, and this is what I found, okay? A picture of this moth, Neopalpa Donald Trumpi moth. That's the science.
This is a real thing, by the way. This is, and yes, the scientist named it that because the moth does look a little bit like Donald Trump with the hair. And that is pretty funny, okay? It's funny. Regardless of how you feel about the guy, that's kind of funny there. But what I am wanting to point your attention to is the fact that Troy Black just acknowledged that he knew that this Donald Trump moth existed before he gave his original prophetic word. Now, he says that he already had his prophetic word scheduled and everything else. But is that a little fishy to you? It is to me. Is that a little fishy to you that he's saying that he already knew this Donald Trump-eye moth existed before he gave his prophetic word? And also, if he's now seen a vision with Donald Trump and there's the Donald Trump-eye moth, why can't he just come out and say it's going to be Donald Trump? Well, could it be because he doesn't want to be pigeonholed into something? He wants to have an out. He wants to say, oh, this is my interpretation, but my interpretation could be wrong. Is that what this is all about? Let's keep listening.
Scientific name of the moth. And if you look at the face of the moth or the head of the moth, the reason a scientist named this moth after Donald Trump in 2017 was because of the way the hair or the top of the moth's head looks. It slightly resembles Donald Trump's hair. And so I saw this the day before, I Googled it and I found it the day before I shared that original quote unquote Mothman prophecy. And so to me, I'm like looking at this and thinking, if I had to guess who the Lord was talking about, I would say it's Donald Trump. Now, even that's not a prophetic word, but that's my attempt at interpreting this word that God has given me. And now you may take it and run with it and pray about it, and God may give you more insight, or you might even interpret it differently, but it seems cut and dry to me.
All right, so now he's encouraging you need to take it and you need to pray over it, and maybe you'll come to a different interpretation. Now, again, this video is really for people who follow Troy Black. If you follow Troy, you know this is true. All the time when he's given his prophetic words, in fact, oftentimes before he even gives his prophetic word, he'll tell you, now listen, you need to take this prophetic word to the Lord in prayer. You need to pray about it and see if God will give you greater understanding. Or, it could be something like pray about it and see if this word applies to you. As if in scripture, people are like, I'm going to give this prophetic word and you need to figure out if it applies to you or not. No, they just tell people this is for you. It's for you, or, they just tell you that. You don't pray about it to figure it out. And it almost seems like the insinuation here is that you could come, like Troy Black could have the interpretation it's Donald Trump, but you could come to Kamala Harris, or I could say somebody totally different. I could say it's Clifford the Big Red Dog. Like, this isn't how it works. This is not how it works. And so it has the appearance of being very spiritual. Oh, you take it, I'm just sharing my opinion. I don't know the interpretation. But in essence, he's not giving you any information that's helpful. This doesn't help you at all. This does not help you. This is totally pointless. This whole Mothman prophecy thing is completely pointless. It is of no benefit to you in your Christian life. If you are watching this sort of stuff, you would have to tell me how this content, and I don't mean this as a joke, seriously, how does this help you be a better Christian? What does this do? It doesn't do anything. But it makes Troy Black appear to be very special, even though he's not telling you anything. Here we go. Let's keep going.
I'm just going to say that. I can't prove that Donald Trump is the moth, but this is why I believe he is. And even just this vision I saw on August 28th, where it's Trump and the moth's behind him, and it almost looks like he's got moth wings. I'm like, Lord, are you giving me another hint that the moth is Trump, right? Like that's how I see it, is I believe that is a hint at who the moth is.
So God's speaking to him all the time, but God won't tell him if it's Trump or not.
Okay. So I personally believe that, but here's why. This is why I believe, because some people are like, well, why don't you just come out and say that Donald Trump's going to win, right? Why haven't you said that? It's because the Lord has not told me to say that. This is not my ministry. These prophetic words are not my words. I can't say anything if God has not told me to say it.
Doesn't that appear to be so pious? I can only say what God has given me, and what God has given me is that Trump or Harris is going to win the election. It appears so pious. Oh, I can only speak what God has given me. What is he giving you that's helping us? This doesn't help anybody. This is all sketchy, guys. Very, very sketchy. And I should probably point out that Troy Black has proven false prophecies. Because most of the time, this is what he does. It's vague nonsense. He's not really committing to anything. He's not giving specific words. It's something that you can always read back into later. In fact, I did a video on my channel. You can search for it probably and find it. I did a video just to show how anybody can give a quote prophetic word and make it come true. So I just sat here and made it very clear, hey, I'm not actually a prophet. I'm not prophesying anything. But I started giving these prophetic words, and then I came back a month later and they all came true. I was like, oh, a politician's going to get kicked out of office. Well, I found a politician who got kicked out of office. There it is. There it is. You can always read back into things. This is what he does all the time. All right, we got about another minute or so left. And this last minute, I'm playing up to this point because I want you to hear what he is going to say at the very end, which is very, very telling and insightful about his theology in general.
Now, I could guess and I could tell you, this is my opinion, this is my thought, which is what I just did, right? But I have to be clear about that this is my interpretation of it. This is my opinion. This is my thought. This is what I believe about it. But I can't say God said if he didn't tell me, right? So that's the number one rule about prophecy, is you do not add to or take away what the Lord is saying. Okay. And if you want to add something, you be very clear. This is my opinion or my thought on it over here, and it is not prophetic. Right. And so that's what I'm trying to do. But at the same time, and some people would ask, well, why? And some people have asked, why hasn't God told you specifically? If God said, why would he tell you about the moth and show you these visions and give you hints toward things, but not right out tell you and again, this is my interpretation. This is my opinion, but I'm going to answer that question from my perspective. Here's why I believe that. And then I'm going to finish sharing this prophetic word. I believe it's because if all the believers thought that Trump was going to win, and God has given me words saying he wants Trump back in power. So I know that that's God's will for this nation. That's what he wants.
Okay. I just wanted you to see that. And if you're going, well, wait, I didn't catch it. He says that it is God's will that Donald Trump be in power. But the insinuation is that he's afraid that if people knew that it may not come to pass. Are you connecting the dots? Basically, Troy Black in his theology thinks that God can will something to happen and it not happen. He can have a plan or a purpose and somebody can thwart that. He believes that God could say, I want Donald Trump to be president of the United States, and then somebody could come in and stop that from happening. Our God is in heaven. He does whatever he pleases. God is sovereign. The way that he talks, he just doesn't understand. Truly, he doesn't truly understand the sovereignty of God. And so I hope this is food for thought for you. If you follow Troy Black, again, he does have proven false prophecies, which makes him, biblically speaking, according to Deuteronomy 18, a false prophet. Therefore, he is somebody to avoid. But he also just has a lot of the sorts of stuff that we looked at today, saying things that don't help you in your faith, saying, I saw this really ambiguous vision and I don't know what the interpretation is. I think it's this, but also it might not be this. So if this thing that I said ends up happening, I'll take credit for it. But if not, it's okay because I didn't really know what the interpretation was in the first place. Guys, this is not true prophecy. This is somebody you need to avoid in the faith. Okay guys, I hope today's video was helpful to you. If it was and you want to help get content like this out to more people on the internet, please take a second now to subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, God bless.